Welcome to If News. Hit that subscribe button and ring that bell so you never miss a breaking story. The three stories I have for you this week are the cryptid Mothman spotted at the site of another major disaster, the claims that the FBI collected and tested evidence of Bigfoot, and the third and final story looks at the recent comments made by the American Commander-in-Chief regarding alien contact. So let's start with Chernobyl and the staff at the nuclear power plant seeing the infamous Mothman flying over the reactor just before the deadly explosion that claimed the lives of many. Laborers at the plant claim that they saw an alarming and frightful animal with monstrous wings, a dark headless body, and red shining eyes, an ominous omen of their coming fate, just before the massive blast and subsequent meltdown of the nuclear power plant. In the days leading up to the Chernobyl catastrophe, a few of the specialists working in the control room of the atomic power plant reported having seen an animal which has come to be known as the Blackbird of Chernobyl. The black bird bearing a striking likeness to another cryptid, the Mothman. The strange bird is said to have descended from the sky over Chernobyl moments before the explosion. Those unfortunate enough to see the animal were said to be tormented by nightmares, and threatening phone calls were reported. Some think that the Blackbird of Chernobyl was a creature that is of the same type as Mothman. The Mothman legend is of a cryptid that lives in the area of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Mothman is said to look like a human feathered creature, albeit a lot bigger than an ordinary man, with wings that are said to measure 10 feet in diameter, and it possesses large red glowing eyes. The Mothman was seen in November 1966 to December 1967, his presence being linked to the Silver Bridge collapse when 46 individuals lost their lives. Mothman-like entities have been seen for much longer and are common in folklore found across the globe. Robert Maxwell, an archaeologist that has visited the irradiated site on a number of occasions, tells of stories he has heard of a black bird whilst travelling through the area. According to the legend, rumours went through the ranks of Chernobyl that 5 employees had seen a large dark headless creature with gigantic wings and fiery red eyes. Chernobyl employees began sharing strangely similar experiences. Some had horrifying nightmares, while others received threatening phone calls, Maxwell said. The second recorded story originates from 2007. It tells of how people in and around the power plant started to encounter a progression of peculiar events around the areas sightings of the Blackbird occurred. Some of the workers reported their bizarre experiences to supervisors of the facility, but there was very little the officials could do, even if they'd be willing to take action. Then, in April, disaster struck. Reactor number 4 of the nuclear power plant exploded on April 26, and 2 days later, the entire city of CRYPTID was evacuated. The legend of the Blackbird has become one of those fables that's difficult to track, because it relies on the accounts of people who have died due to radioactive contamination that they received from the disaster. Maxwell went on to say, the Blackbird has also become one of those fairly safe legends, where if you try to look for proof, it might not be available because the workers are dead, or maybe the sightings were never officially recorded. So, for people trying to check the veracity of these claims, of course, you've got to take them on face value, because there's not a lot of history or archaeology to go on, but the stories persist even to this day. Moving on to the next story, and our old friend the Bigfoot, and possibly some evidence that the hairy hominid was investigated by the FBI. In what sounds like an episode of the X-Files, the FBI are said to have tested a sample of Bigfoot hair back in the 1970s. A 93-year-old man searching for Sasquatch, Peter Byrne. Mr. Byrne was the first person to persuade the FBI to run tests on samples of hair to check whether it came from Bigfoot. The Oregon man has made it his life's work to prove the legendary animals known as Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and the abominable snowman and Yeti are real. In 1976, he figured out a way to get the FBI to test hair and tissue samples that he was sure would support his case for the existence of these hominids. Newly released records show that the FBI did investigate the hair and help in the quest to reveal the Sasquatch as a living creature back in February of 1977. The 93-year-old Peter Byrne disclosed to CNBC that despite everything, he hasn't surrendered any expectations of being able to demonstrate that Bigfoot is a genuine animal, albeit an exceedingly uncommon beast. "It's a great challenge," Byrne said, when asked to explain his interest over 9 decades in finding creatures widely believed to be figments of the imagination or the inventions of conmen. Byrne's webpage says that he has always had an interest in the unknown and the mysterious since his father used to tell him bedtime stories about the Yeti of the Himalayas. The page says his first opportunity to go looking for the Yeti occurred in 1946 when he was still in the British Royal Air Force in Bombay, India. A photograph on the man's webpage features the cryptozoologist with what is claimed to be a Yeti scalp from the Himalayas in Nepal circa 1958. Another photograph shows a claimed footprint from Bigfoot. Byrne took part in 3 expeditions looking for the Yeti in Nepal during the late 1950s. On these trips, he claims that he found 2 or 3 sets of Yeti prints, these tracks being discovered at altitudes of 15,000 feet. Moving to the US in the 1960s, Byrne proceeded to coordinate the Bigfoot Information Center and Exhibition in Oregon. "I was in it full time, 7 days a week," Byrne said of his earlier Bigfoot hunts, which were last funded in the 1990s. "Right now, I'm still active. We have motion-sensitive cameras out in the mountains of Oregon," he said. But, he added, "It's a hobby for me now." He went on to talk about delicate cameras being set up in the mountains of Oregon, but that this was just a side interest to him now. When told about the FBI documents showing his correspondence with the agency in the 1970s, asking for it to test the hair samples, Byrne chuckled, but he also said, "I don't remember this. It's out of my memory," he added, while noting that he does recall asking the FBI in the 1970s about an incident at a campground in Washington state where a Bigfoot was suspected. The tests were carried out nonetheless, and sadly, or maybe expectedly, they came back with an identity for the animal that the sample had come from. That animal was nothing more than a deer, so for Byrne and many others, the search continues. The final story for the week has President-elect Donald Trump commenting on the phenomena of UFOs, a hot ticket this week, with the subject being spread all over the mainstream media and even a long-awaited interview of Bob Lazar by Joe Rogan on his popular JRE channel. The president says he's not yet been persuaded that UFOs are genuine, yet he pledges the military will stay alert for any indication of extraterrestrial visitation. Trump spoke about UFOs in an interview with ABC. He said he's had a brief meeting on the subject, but isn't convinced they are real. He acknowledges that Navy pilots have made unusual sightings in recent years, especially with the Navy video recording last month and the updating of its guidelines for pilots to report UFO sightings. Trump then promised eager Giorgio Stephanopoulos of Ancient Aliens fame that he'll be the first to know. Stephanopoulos pressed the president on a recent rise in US Navy pilots reporting unidentified aircraft, asking what Trump made of it. "I think it's probably, I want them to think whatever they think. They do say, and I've seen, and I've read, and I've heard, and I did have one very brief meeting on it, but people are saying they're seeing UFOs. Do I believe it? Not particularly," Trump said. And those are the stories which caught my eye this week. What are your thoughts on Trump's denial of extraterrestrials? Do you think the FBI possibly faked the results of their test to hide Bigfoot? And do you think the Mothman played a part in the nuclear meltdown at Chernobyl? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to research any of these stories yourself, links are in the description. As always, if you like what I do here on the channel, hit that red button, like and share. You can catch the latest by searching We Are If. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.